Hey, my name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. We've been working on this image gallery that's a little bit more intermediate, and last time we focused on the HTML and the CSS. Today we're going to work on the JavaScript. What you can do is come in here, and when you hover, you get this little icon. We set that up last time, and then you've got arrows that you can click, and as you click, they will move to the next image over. You can also use your keyboard arrows and hit over either direction, and you see there's even a little animation there showing that you've hit them. And then you can either click off here, click here, either of those will close it, or again, obviously you can click the buttons to advance. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. Today we're just going to work on the JavaScript. I should mention I've done a couple other image galleries before. If this ends up being something that's a little too complex, I'll put some links in the description to some that are a little bit more beginner, and hopefully those will still be a help to you. I don't want to scare you away though. This isn't overly complex, and I think if you follow along, you should be able to follow along just fine. Okay, so we've set everything up here where we've got all the icons changing or the cursor changing. We've got this little hover effect going, and right now we've got it showing to where this is displaying for us. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove that just so that we can kind of get back to our default, which will look like this. And as we hover, you see things pull up. Now what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and just work on the JavaScript. I've already hooked this up here and deferred it so it loads after the body. But let's come up here and we're going to do a few things. First of all, we're just going to focus on getting the image to pop up where it's supposed to pop up. And to do that, we're going to need to grab a few things. All right, first of all, we want to grab all of the images that we want to be able to click on and expand. So we'll say const, and we call those Lightbox enabled images. And we'll say query selector all, and we call those Lightbox enabled. That was the class we set on them. Next, let's go ahead and grab the Lightbox container. So we'll say Lightbox container, and this is just a query selector, and we call that Lightbox container. Next, let's grab the actual image, Lightbox. And I see here already I've got this misspelled again for like the third thing I've misspelled already this video. Lightbox image. And we're just going to do query selector. And this is the actual image inside that lightbox. And again, we just call that Lightbox image. Okay, so with those things set up, we need to set up some event listeners. The first one is we want to grab those Lightbox enabled and say for each of these, so we're going to loop through this node list. So for each image in this, we want to add an event listener. So image.add event listener, and we're listening for a click. Let's go ahead and grab the event in case we need it. And right now we'll just say console log e.target, all right, the thing that we're clicking on. Let's come in here and open up the inspector here, and we'll look at the console. And as we click, we're getting this image. And we've got a bunch of things on it here. We've got images, the actual image itself, that small image. And then we've got the data-images image src, which was our larger image. Here, images/image3. So that's the full-size image that we've got of this exact same photo here. Now I'm noticing something that we kind of probably would be easier to go ahead and fix in the HTML. We can do it here in JavaScript instead, but I should probably have the JPEG extension added on all of these. So let me do that. All right, we could add those in JavaScript, but it's easy enough just to add them right there. Okay, so we've clicked on that. Now what we want to do is we want to say, whenever we click, we want to pass the e.target.dataset, which is how you access those data attributes, .image src. So let's grab this again. We just want to make sure we're getting the right thing. Okay, we're getting image, image, image. We're getting each of the individual images. So that's what we want to set our image lightbox to. So if I come in here and we're going to say image lightbox.src is now equal to this. Now we're not going to be able to see anything yet because we also need to grab that Lightbox container and add a class, and that class will be active. So if we come in here and we click, we should now get that image pulling up there for us. I refresh, I click here, this image is coming up. That's perfect, that's what we want. Now let's go ahead and break some of these out into functions just to make it a little easier to read and to access later. So I'll come in here and we'll say const show lightbox. And we're just going to write this as an arrow function. Let's just keep it on the same line because it's going to be pretty short. And we're just going to come up here and say we want to set the container to that, the Lightbox container to have that class. That means we can come in here and say show Lightbox, and let's see if it still works. It still works. Now let's do the same thing here. We're going to say set active image. So const set active image, and again, we will just set it just like this. This is going to take in an image, and then what we'll do is we'll say image.src is equal to, and let's just take the image itself, so that's all we're going to pass in here, this image that we've looped through, and then we'll use this set active image function to grab the data set image src. So let's come down here and we're going to say set active image, and we're going to pass it the image. Okay, let's make sure this is working again. Okay, perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, now let's go ahead and copy this, and we're going to have both a show and a hide lightbox. And the only difference is that this will remove it. All right, and then what we can do here is we want to set a event listener on the whole Lightbox container. So Lightbox container, normally it's not showing and there's no way to click on it because we've hidden those pointer events. But we can come in here and say add event listener, and we can say click. We don't need to grab the event itself. What we can just say is remove Lightbox. Again, we can keep this fairly brief here. So now when we come in here and we click here, let's say remove Lightbox, hide Lightbox. There we go. All right, so we click anywhere and it closes. All right, those don't do anything yet. In fact, when we click on the buttons, they actually close the Lightbox. But we've already got a basic functionality set up here where we can click any image and it pops up. All right, easy enough. That's kind of what we've done in some other videos, broken it out a little bit differently here. But now what we need to do is we're going to add some functionality for the actual buttons themselves. So let's go ahead and grab those buttons. Let's see, let's come here and say const lightbox buttons is equal to query selector all, and we call those lightbox button. All right, so each of them had that class. And we also have two more. We had, let's just grab them here. I think we had an ID on one called write, and we'll say lightbox, or let's see, what should we call this? Yeah, lightbox button right. We'll do the same thing here, except we'll call this left. All right, we've gotten both of those as well. Right now we're going to loop through these lightbox buttons and add an event listener on them. So we'll say for each button, we want to add an event listener. The event we're listening for is a click. And we are going to go ahead and grab that event just in case we need it. Now, the first thing we want to do is actually stop the propagation. All right, now, if you're like, what in the world does that mean? When we click here, this is part of the Lightbox container. So if we click on this, it actually closes everything down and won't end up running whatever we have passed here. So what we want to do is say, hey, when we're clicking on this, don't bubble that click up to the container and then to the Lightbox container. Instead, only stick with this one thing. Let me show you how that works. So if I say console log button clicked, and then let's come up here, and for this hide, before this hide Lightbox, we'll say container clicked. All right, so if we come in here and I click here, you'll notice first I get the button click, and then it bubbles up and it hits the container as well. We don't want that to happen. So what we can do is we can say e.stopPropagation. And this is a method that lives on the event. So now when we come in here and we click, we should only get this console log for the button being clicked. And that's all we get. So it stops that bubbling up to where we don't get that event listener to trigger on the entire container. All right, so that's the first thing we need to do. The second thing we need to do is we need to transition left or right. So we're going to actually use a function we're going to write that handles those kinds of clicks. That way, when we write the keyboard event, we can use the same exact function. We're going to call that transition slide handler. We're going to pass it the e.currentTarget.id. Before we do too much, let's go ahead and see what we're getting here. So if we come in here and we console log this, when we open this up and click, we're getting the ID of whatever button it is we're clicking. We're getting the ID left, the ID right, ID left, ID right. These are the things we grabbed up this way. That will help us know whether we should move left or right in kind of our list of images. So let's switch these two comments out. And now we need to write this function, transition slide handler. So let's come back up here to our functions. We'll say const transition slide handler. And here we're getting something. We'll just call it move item. That's the thing that we're getting. And we're going to pass it here. And we're going to use a ternary, which is like a short little if statement. And we can just say move item dot includes. If it includes, and we could say left or right. We only have two options here. We could say if it includes left, then, and this is how you write a ternary, you write this question mark, and this says what to do if that's true. So we're going to use another function that we're going to write called transition slides left. All right, so that's what you should do if it's true. And if it's false, then we will transition slides right. All right, now we need to write these functions. Let's jump up here and say const transition slides left. And let's just console log left. All right, and then we're going to come in here and just copy this down and change this to right and this to right. Now let's come in here and we're going to click transition slides left. Let's see, slide and slide. Let's try that again. Come here and we click, we get left, click here and we should get right. Okay, so now we know which one we're using. We're able to use this event listener, pass it to this handler passes it to these slides, and we can use that to decide kind of what we do. Now the first thing we want to do is add some kind of focus state to this button so that if somebody uses their keyboard arrow or clicks here, it shows kind of the focus state that we're going to have set on it. And we set that in the CSS, if I recall. So we'll come in here and we're just going to say, we're going to grab that left button right here. So we'll grab that button and we'll simply say call focus on it. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to figure out which image is the active image. We've already got this set active image here. So let's go ahead and use just a let variable up this way because we'll be changing it. We're just going to call it active image. Now we can come down here to our set active image and we can add a few more things. So first we can say active image is equal to, now what we need to do is we need to make it equal to whatever the number of image it is here. So if it's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth image. Now there's a couple of methods we can use if this, these Lightbox, let's see, where are we at? The Lightbox enabled node list if it were an array. So let's go ahead and create it or add it as an array. So let's say const Lightbox array is equal to, and we can go array.from Lightbox enabled, which will turn this node list into an array. Now what we can do is use this Lightbox array and say active image is equal to that Lightbox array dot index of image. All right, so what we're doing here, let's go ahead and console log this. When we click here, it's telling us this is the second position in that array. Now remember 0, 1, 2. So it's the third image. There should be 0. This should be 1. So it's actually saying, hey, let's look inside this array and figure out which index the image that's been passed into it is in. All right, which position it's in that array. So now that we've got that, we know whether to move right or left. Well, now what we know is that whenever we set an active image by clicking, it's going to actually update this active image variable. We can use that now in our transitioning slides left or right. We can come down here and we can just say active image, we're going to write another ternary here. If it's equal to 0, then we want to set the active image. And here again, we can use our array. So we can say Lightbox array. Now what we could do is say, hey, let's pass in if it's, we'll just make it number 5, the last image. But what if you add extra images? So to make this a little more flexible, we can just use that array and say array, and then just say, let's grab the last image. Now because we might use this later, let's go ahead and come up here to our array, and let's say const last image is equal to Lightbox array dot length minus 1, which means no matter how long our array is, we'll always have this as our last image, just like we need it. We'll come back here, and now we can just use this variable here and say, I want you, if I come in here and I open this up, it's throwing an error at me because I haven't finished this. If I open this up and I'm on this image and I click left one more time, jump to this image. All right, set that one as the active image. If it's not that last one, then I want to set the active image to the Lightbox array, and then I'm going to grab the current active image. So whatever that active number is. So if I click on this one, it would be 2. So grab that current one, dot previous element sibling. Now, let's open this up here. When I click over, now I'm getting an error. Lightbox, the button left of focus is not a function. And I see my error that you probably have already seen, which is that these should be query selector and not query selector all. Let's see if that works now. Yeah, so now I come over here and I click. Now, this is the very first image, which means if I click here, I should actually loop back around to this image. And that's what happens. So that's cool. Now, if I come back this way, I'm just getting right because we haven't done anything down here. So let's do the same thing. We're going to actually grab all of this and we're kind of copy it down to here. And instead of the left here, we're going to do right. And now instead of asking if this is the 0 image, we're going to ask if it's the last image. Remember, we grabbed that up this way, and that tells us it's the last one in this array. So we've grabbed the last image, and we said if that's the case, now instead of going to the lightbox.lastImage, we want to go to lightbox.0. Otherwise, we want to set the image not to the previous element sibling, but to the next element sibling. All right, so in case you kind of got lost there, as we click here, we click this left arrow, several things are going to happen. Number one, we're going to add this focus state, which we're going to need to remove to make it animate here. And we'll do that in a moment. All right, secondly, we're asking, is this the first image in this array of images? If so, then go ahead and set the active image over here. If it's not, then just jump to the next element sibling in our list of images and pass that in back up here to our setActiveImage function. Now I come over here and I click on the right one, same thing is happening except the opposite way. We're asking if it's the last image. If so, then set the next one to 0, this first one. Otherwise, just grab the next element sibling over, in a sense, to the right in our array. So just in a few moments here, we've got it to where it's working. We click, and anywhere we click except for the button, it will close it down. If we click a button here, it's just going to continue to loop through all these images over and over. Or if we go right here, the same thing will happen. Now, if we get to the end of this, if we don't want it to loop back around, in other words, if they're not, if it's on a mobile device or something like that, and they don't know how many images are in here, you don't want them to be cycling through and realizing, wait, I think I've seen these before. So it might be nice to actually hide this button once they've hit the last one. We can do that, and we'll just actually use our setActiveImage here to hide the left or right. We can do that with something called a switch statement. We're going to take in our active image, whatever the new active image is, and we're going to run our switch on that. I need to actually add this in parentheses here. And then we can write different cases and say, hey, if this case occurs, then do this. Now, there's only two that we care about. The first image, here, case 0, what we would want to do there is we would want to say, let's grab that lightbox button left. We want to add that class list of inactive. What that will do is, as we click over here, you'll notice it adds an inactive class that we added last time here. And that inactive class, let's see where it's at, right here, essentially just makes it invisible and to where you can't click on it. All right, and then let's break from that. The other case that we want to worry about is if it is the last image. And again, this is the final array index. And here we're just going to say, let's grab the right and add a class of inactive. So if we click over here, that should work. Come over this way, we're not adding them back in. All right, so let's say if it's not one of those two, then our default will be this. Let's just say Lightbox buttons. We'll just loop through both of them here and say for each button, button.classlist.add, or remove rather, inactive. If we click here, both of them should show. We get over here and it disappears. Come over this way and it disappears. Now you don't have to do that, but I think it's nice so that they're not constantly looping through till they realize, oh, I've already seen these. All right, so, and then they can click this way. If they're clicking over here and then they accidentally click, I guess that's something you may not like, so you can decide what you want to do with that. Now, one other thing let's probably do is when you click here, you'll notice that that focus state stays. We want it to actually kind of animate in and out. So let's see, let's add something called let's add another function. Let's call it remove button animation. And we're not going to pass anything in here because all we're going to do is we're going to basically copy this here, except instead of removing a class, we're going to set a timeout. This essentially allows us to wait like a second or something like that, and then to do something. So the function we're going to run is just grab the button and do blur, which removes the focus state. And then we can add whatever. Let's add like 200, which is like 0.2 of a second. And if we do that, and then we call remove button animation, let's see, where should we call this? I guess let's call it after we transition the slides left or right. So we'll just come in here, copy this, and copy this. We come in here and we click this. Now it should remove. Now, right now I'm hovering over it, so you can't really see the animation working perfectly until I pull my mouse off. But especially once we hook up the keyboard, you'll be able to see that move as you click the keyboard over. All right, so we've got everything set up now except for the keyboard event handler. Because we've done so much good work on setting up all these functions to work properly, it's actually not going to be too hard to get the keyboard to work too. So we'll come down here, let's give it a little bit more space. We'll say window.add event listener, because we want to listen on the entire window. We're going to listen for a key down, and we do want to go ahead and grab that event. All right, first let's just console log the e dot, let's see, that's the event of the key down, and we want the key from that event. So if we come here, I'll click over here, and I'm going to start clicking some buttons, arrow up, left, down, right. I mean, I can hit other buttons too, but it's giving us the name of the actual buttons that we're pressing on the keyboard. Now, if the Lightbox container is not active, we don't really want to do anything. So what we can do is we can come in here and we can say if the Lightbox container .classlist.contains active, and by putting this bang on the front, we're saying if it doesn't contain active, then we can just return. So if we come here and we click over here and we start pressing buttons, nothing happens except it's trying to use the buttons to go up and down. But now if I click here, we're getting all these events. Now there's two in particular that would be important, and those two, let's open this back up, would be left and right. And you notice it's capitalized left and capitalized right. So let's come in here and let's say something like this. If e.key.includes, first of all, left, and then let's copy this here. We'll say, or if e.key.include includes right, then we want to do two things. First, we want to prevent the default. If this somehow is squashed or something like that, we don't want to actually try to move this screen over left or right. So we'll say prevent default. This is a method that lives on that key down event. And then we're just going to use our transition slide handler, and we're going to pass it something. Now, because our IDs are not capitalized, they're lowercase, this left and right here, let's go ahead and pass e.key.toLowercase, and that way we're passing like a lowercase right or a lowercase left. So if we come in here and open this up and hit over, everything is working as expected. And because we earlier set it up to where if we were to click this button, it would actually continue and loop back around. Technically, if you use your keyboard, it'll just loop right back around like you'd expect. So we come over here, it jumps back around. Now we've got a little problem here because I'm noticing we have got no handler, no buttons there now on this one, except for when we refresh now, it'll show it. So what we need to do is actually go ahead and remove that inactive class every time we press either the keyboard or one of those buttons. I think that might be the easiest. So let's do this. Let's say remove button animation. And let's add another little helper function here. We'll just call it remove button inactive class. And here again, we're going to, let's actually grab this here and copy this down this way. And now let's go ahead and call this here instead of doing this whole thing. And then let's also call it up this way before we even do anything with the switch. Now if we come in here, click over, come here, yeah, now they show. So what we're doing is whenever we set a new active image, which just means there's an image being displayed here, we're immediately removing both of the inactive classes and then quickly adding one back in if we need to. Otherwise, it's going to remove them again, which doesn't hurt anything because it's already been removed. Cool, I hope that was a lot of fun for you. If you like this kind of thing, please like the video and subscribe. Believe it or not, without you doing that, there's literally nothing I can really do to get people interested in this, and that'll be a big help to me as I try to make more content. If you have suggestions for what we could have done differently here, or you want to see something else, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to try to explore something. I had somebody who watched a video actually suggest something like this, and so that's why I created this video. If you have an idea, let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to try to indulge if I can figure out how to do it. All right, thanks so much, and happy coding.